You've been deceived. They said that being truthful in everything, speaking your mind, and acting with kindness is the path to greatness. But the stark reality shows otherwise. The naive who believe this end up crushed, forgotten, or ridiculed. Machiavelli knew this better than anyone. That's why he wrote in codes, left clues, but never revealed the secret explicitly. He understood that the truth about power cannot be revealed to the people because they can't bear to hear it. The secret is too brutal. It's not morality that decides who rises, but the coldness of those who accept that the end justifies the means. It's not purity that protects, but the ability to create the appearance of virtue while acting with surgical calculation behind the scenes. This is the poison no one tells you. Absolute kindness doesn't generate respect, it generates contempt. Those who strive to be loved at any cost become pawns in the hands of the stronger. The reality is stark. It's better to be feared than loved, as long as you know how to avoid being hated. This is the line that separates leaders from sheep. Machiavelli's forbidden secret is that no matter how hard you try to please, as long as you beg for validation, you'll be treated as disposable. Respect is born of moderate fear, strategic silence, and relentless discipline. Those who understand this don't just become free, they become dangerous. And that's why Machiavelli didn't dare say it out loud, because he knew few would bear to look in the mirror after hearing it. Now, you have two choices. Continue believing in the fables of authenticity, transparency, and unconditional kindness, or cross the border into forbidden territory where power is earned, not granted. But beware, once you hear this secret, there's no going back. You'll begin to see patterns in every politician, every boss, every person around you, and you'll realize that the game was never about justice, but about decisions based on real human nature. Machiavelli left the warning hidden. Those who know govern, those who ignore are governed. The question is, will you remain in the audience, or will you have the courage to step onto the stage and assume the role few dare to play? There are truths that are not meant to be spoken in public, and Machiavelli knew this like few others. He didn't write for everyone, but for those who dared to govern amidst human chaos. What he called a politics guided by reality, not ideals, was, in practice, a silent warning. If you listen to what I'm about to say, you can no longer claim innocence. It's like opening a forbidden book. You feel each line cut through your skin like a blade. When someone understands that the end justifies the means, they also realize there's no going back to naivete. This doesn't mean cheap cynicism, but the courage to look at human nature without makeup. Those who can't bear this burden try to take refuge in beautiful but ineffective speeches. Most prefer to believe that kindness is enough. Few accept that power demands uncomfortable choices, such as the calculated use of force and decisions based on real human nature. This is the border. Knowing that you will lose friends, reputation, and perhaps the most comfortable illusion of all, that it is possible to be pure in a world that is not. Think about the workplace, where everyone claims to value transparency, but where promotions go to those who master the silent theater of influence. Machiavelli's forbidden manual is no different. It gives you the tools you shouldn't use, but that others already use against you. Have you ever noticed how, in any company, it's not the most competent who wins, but rather those who understand the game of the appearance of virtue? The person who always arrives confident, even when failing, inspires more confidence than the one who arrives hesitantly, even when brimming with talent. This is virtue in action, the ability to bend fortune to your advantage with constant adaptability. Those who ignore this logic become pawns, easy targets for sycophants, and worse, prisoners of their own naivete. Forbidden openness is exactly that. The moment you understand that you're not just competing for results, but surviving in a field where every gesture carries political weight. And the question that begins to bother you is, would you rather continue playing blind or learn the underground rules? This warning is uncomfortable. It shows that the world is not divided between good and evil, but between those who see the machinery and those who are crushed by it. Consider history. Leaders who tried to govern based solely on ideals, without the coolness of their own loyal armies or the firmness of a strategy of controlled fear, were swallowed up by the very people they swore to protect. It's hard to admit, but better to be feared than loved when the risk is being hated and losing everything. The forbidden opening is like that door you hesitate to cross because you know there's no return on the other side. It's where you begin to realize that even kindness without strategic intelligence can become poison against your own authority. And deep down, it's at this point that the inevitable question arises. Doesn't reality, raw and unromanced, speak louder than the public morality everyone pretends to follow? There's a fatal mistake many make when studying Machiavelli. They treat his ideas as poetry or abstract philosophy, when in fact he was writing a survival manual. He wasn't talking about angels or saints, but about what really moves the pieces on the board, virtù and fortuna. Virtù isn't goodness, it's courage, cunning, and the ability to bend circumstances. Fortune isn't magical luck, it's the unpredictable chaos of life, which can either crown a prince or overthrow him in a matter of days. Those who govern, and here I'm talking not only about kingdoms, but also about businesses, families, or even life itself, must accept that reality doesn't obey the sermons of public morality. While most waste time trying to be loved, the strategic player learns to avoid being hated, and that's enough to maintain power. Because in the end, the crowd applauds those who appear righteous, but follows those who show strength. Consider a practical example. In the financial market, many believe that investor confidence is the result of fine speeches or a company's good image. They're mistaken. Trust is born from the perception of strength, solid reserves, firm contracts, leadership that conveys stability. This is the calculated use of force in its modern version. A CEO who relies solely on public reputation, without having his own loyal armies within the company, sooner or later becomes hostage to the board, the shareholders, or an image crisis. Public morality will dictate that he needs to please everyone. Reality shows that pleasing everyone is a sure recipe for destruction. Virtù is precisely this ability to make firm decisions when the storm arrives, even if it violates what would be considered politically correct. A fortune will test everyone, but only those with virtù transform misfortune into opportunity and opportunity into dominance. This is why Machiavelli was never a political romantic. He knew that politics guided by reality, not ideals, was the only way to remain standing when everything around him was crumbling. While philosophers preached universal love, he taught how to deal with betrayals, wars, and conspiracies, themes that, let's face it, remain relevant today. Those who live by public morality dream of a just world. Those who understand reality learn to create systems that work even in chaos. And herein lies the point. The battle is not just between virtù and fortuna, but between your illusion and your ability to adapt. With each decision, you must choose. Will you be dragged down by fortuna, or will you build enough virtù to use it to your advantage? And it is in this choice that the next question arises. After all, in the realm of power, is it better to be loved or to be feared? Few pieces of advice from Machiavelli are as often quoted and as misunderstood as this: better to be feared than loved. But the detail almost no one realizes is that he never said to rule by hate. Hatred is corrosive, unpredictable, and puts any leader on the brink of ruin. The secret lies in the blind spot. The ruler, the boss, the father of a family, or even the leader of oneself must, above all, avoid being hated. This means that respect is more valuable than affection. Love is a luxury that sways with the wind. Respect is a pact that survives storms. In practical terms, think of the teacher who tries too hard to please. The class may even like him, but they don't take his authority seriously. The one who is fair but firm may not win daily applause, but he plants roots of credibility that endure the test of time. Look at corporate life. The manager who tries to be everyone's friend ends up suffocated by demands, manipulated by sycophants, and discredited by his own team. The leader who knows how to balance firmness and prudence may not be invited to happy hour, but is the one the team follows when the ship starts to sink. This is the spirit of decisions based on real human nature. Understanding that people respect those who set clear boundaries more than those who try to earn love with endless concessions. Love is volatile, respect is stable, and respect is often born from the calculated use of force, swift cuts, clear orders, and maintained discipline. It's not about shouting or instilling irrational fear, but about making it clear that there is a red line that cannot be crossed. The result? Moderate fear, but lasting trust. Machiavelli taught that, if possible, the ideal would be to be loved and feared simultaneously. But since fortune rarely bestows two gifts at once, the wise ruler must choose. And faced with the choice, controlled fear is more reliable than fickle love. This is not cynicism. It is politics guided by reality, not ideals. Love depends on the mood of the people. Respect is born from the constancy of those who act firmly. Ultimately, this is the art of walking a tightrope, showing enough strength to be taken seriously without crossing the line that arouses hatred. Because once hated, not even virtue is enough to save. And it is precisely on this stage, amid applause and boos, that the next dilemma arises. How much of one's strength should be visible and how much should be masked by the appearance of virtue? Machiavelli was blunt. Everyone admires the appearance of virtue, but few can tolerate raw effectiveness. He knew that reputation works like theater. The audience applauds the actor who embodies noble values, even if, behind the scenes, that actor makes harsh and calculated decisions. This isn't cheap hypocrisy, but a survival strategy. In any sphere, politics, business, or relationships, people want to believe they're dealing with someone with integrity. The point is that integrity, in this sense, isn't about being good, but about appearing good. That's why so many leaders collapse when they confuse the stage with the backstage. They strive to be genuinely virtuous, while their adversary dons the right mask and silently applies the calculated use of force. The result? Those who appear virtuous earn collective respect, even if they are ruthless in their internal decisions. Think of a politician on the campaign trail. He speaks of love for the people, social justice, compassion, and equality. Words that touch hearts but often bear no relation to his real agenda. The public buys into the image because they want to believe the myth. This mechanism is no different in the corporate world. The CEO who sells himself as a defender of the corporate family while mercilessly firing employees when the numbers drop. Cruel, maybe. Effective? Definitely. The mask acts as a shield. It offers the assurance that people will see in you what they need to see, not what really happens behind the scenes. And herein lies the key to constant adaptability. You don't need to be virtuous all the time, but you do need to know when and how to appear virtuous. This is the invisible game of reputation. True effectiveness requires decisions that rarely align with the ideals preached in public. Sometimes it's necessary to cut quickly, to remove someone loyal but incompetent, or to close one door to ensure another remains open. If you try to be too transparent, you risk losing authority and even orchestrating your own downfall. However, a mask, when worn well, creates room for maneuver. You protect your image while taking the measures that secure power. Machiavelli understood that it's not about eternal deception, but about balancing backstage and stage. And the question that arises is an uncomfortable one. To what extent is your authenticity a virtue, and to what extent does it give ammunition to the enemy? We live in an age where authenticity is preached as the highest human value. But Machiavelli would have laughed at this belief. He knew that when you reveal your entire self, you inevitably expose weaknesses that will be exploited. Too much transparency is like handing over a map with all the vulnerable points of your castle. The enemy appreciates it. The idea that being completely open generates respect is a policy guided by ideals, not reality. Reality is crueler. Those who reveal every detail become predictable, and predictability is the death of power. Consider how, even in a business negotiation, if you disclose your entire budget right away, you lose room to maneuver. The same goes for your personal life. Sharing your deepest fears with someone you barely know is like handing over free ammunition. Authenticity, when misused, becomes naivete, disguised as courage. A leader who overshares his doubts may seem human, but he also conveys insecurity. Imagine a military commander revealing to his troops that he's unsure of winning the battle. The result would be chaos. Therefore, Machiavelli taught the calculated use of force through words as well. Show enough to generate trust, but never so much as to be held hostage by your own transparency. It's the same logic behind avoiding being hated. You don't need to be loved for revealing everything. You just need to avoid being hated for strategic silence. Wisdom lies in the right balance. Say enough to maintain credibility, hide enough to preserve power. In practice, this means cultivating a kind of internal filter. Ask yourself, what do I gain by revealing this? If the answer is nothing more than vulnerability, keep quiet. Absolute transparency may work in self-help books, but in the real-life arena, it provides more ammunition than protection. What maintains power is not pouring out truths in public, but mastering the game of selective communication. Machiavelli understood that even virtue depends on this balance, saying what is necessary, keeping what is essential. And it is precisely here that an even more sophisticated art emerges: strategic silence, the ability to say less than you know, so that others become entangled in interpretations that you yourself control. Silence, for Machiavelli, was never the absence of power, but its most sophisticated form. When you say less than you know, you create a fog that forces others to fill the gaps with their own assumptions. And curiously, they almost always project into these gaps something greater than reality. It's the paradox. The less you explain, the more important you seem. The calculated use of force isn't limited to weapons or orders, but also to unspoken words. Politics guided by reality, not ideals, shows that those who expose themselves too much lose authority. Those who speak little gain a space of mystery that intimidates and attracts at the same time. Think about meetings. The boss who says as little as possible but pays attention to every detail is more feared than the one who talks endlessly. Strategic silence has a brutal advantage. It shifts the weight of interpretation to the other side. By remaining silent, you force the other person to reveal more than they'd like. It's like an interrogation. Those who talk too much reveal contradictions. Those who speak too little force the other person to fill the space with information that can be used against them. This even works in personal life. How many times has someone felt uncomfortable in the face of your silence and ended up confessing more than they should? This is virtù and fortuna in action, transforming pause into power, using another person's discomfort as an invisible weapon. Silence is also a shield against hatred. If cursed words can generate resentment, silence gives no room for resistance. It preserves your image and keeps your appearance of virtue intact. But silence shouldn't be confused with passivity. It's an active strategy, a conscious choice. Instead of filling every space with explanations, learn to use pauses, glances, and even the unsaid as part of your communication. Try, for example, responding to a provocation with a simple, enigmatic smile. This small action can have more effect than a long, tiring defense. Machiavelli knew that avoiding hatred also involves avoiding pointless arguments. Strategic silence not only protects, but also amplifies your value. Those who speak less become rarer, and those who are rare become more desired. And it is precisely at this point that another key to power comes into play, transforming your presence into scarcity to the point where others begin to vie for your attention as if it were a prize. The logic is simple, but few have the courage to apply it. The more available you are, the less value you have. Machiavelli would have understood this immediately because he knew that politics is guided by reality, not ideals. In reality, human beings don't desire what is always at hand. They desire what seems rare, scarce, almost unattainable. Excessive availability kills respect and in turn erodes desire. Look at relationships. Those who respond immediately to every message, who say yes to everything, end up losing their magnetism. The same happens at work. The professional who accepts any task without negotiating deadlines is soon seen as disposable. The art of scarcity is a form of calculated use of force applied to time and attention. The more selective you are, the more others begin to perceive your presence as a privilege. Becoming the prize isn't arrogance, it's strategy. Think about what happens when a product is released in a limited edition. People rush to buy it, not just because of what it offers, but because they know they might miss out. This same mechanism works with people. When you moderate your presence, your company begins to carry the symbolic weight of exclusivity. And this is the essence of virtù and fortuna, manipulating others' perceptions to your advantage, adapting to the reality of the human game. Even great leaders used this tactic. Napoleon, for example, knew how to appear at key moments and then withdraw shortly afterward, leaving the feeling that his presence was almost divine. This tactic applied today can be as simple as not being present at every conversation or choosing strategic moments to position yourself. A lack of presence also helps avoid being hated, because by making yourself less accessible, you expose yourself less to the criticisms and flaws common to overcontact. Distance creates an aura of respect that intimacy destroys. This is why many artists and leaders only appear on special occasions, not because they don't have time, but because they understand the psychological value of absence. And here's the irony: the more you withdraw, the more people chase you. The prize never begs to be chosen. It waits and others fight for it. The challenge is to resist the temptation to always be available. Because when scarcity is well balanced, respect and desire grow together. And when respect solidifies, space opens for another Machiavelli principle: well-used cruelty, the kind that cuts quickly and reinforces authority without lingering on concessions that erode its image. Machiavelli wasn't afraid to call a spade a spade. He asserted that if cruelty is inevitable, it should be applied all at once, like a surgical cut. Harsh as it may seem, human beings endure a brief pain better than an endless series of small wounds. Politics guided by reality, not ideals, teaches that prolonging kindness can become disguised cruelty. Authority erodes, respect evaporates, and trust gives way to distrust. Think of a company you need to lay off. When the leader delays the decision, trying to be nice, they end up fueling rumors, insecurity, and a loss of morale. The manager who makes a firm and swift decision, however, despite being seen as harsh, preserves discipline and clarity. Cruelty, when used well, doesn't destroy. It prevents the slow erosion of authority. This is where the calculated use of force comes in. Being cruel doesn't mean being brutal, but strategic. It's not about humiliating or crushing, but about acting at the right moment with precision. Consider Julius Caesar. He knew when to punish severely to maintain order and when to forgive to win allies. This balance is virtue, the ability to adapt without losing control of the narrative. Conversely, excessive kindness has a corrosive effect. The subordinate who errs without consequences continues to err. The child who never receives limits grows up believing the world is his servant. The politician who only pleases loses respect and ends up swallowed up by the very people he was trying to please. Avoiding being hated doesn't mean never punishing, but punishing fairly and swiftly without leaving unnecessary scars. Well-used cruelty has another silent effect. It generates predictability. The controlled fear of just and immediate action maintains order without the need for constant violence. It's like the shadow of a lion. Just knowing it's there keeps the jungle in balance. In practical terms, think of a leader who applies an exemplary sanction in a case of grave disrespect. He won't need to repeat the gesture several times because the memory of the single cut will spread as a collective lesson. This is the power of transforming cruelty into a pedagogical tool, not sadism. Machiavelli knew that the end justifies the means when action preserves stability, and after applying the cut, authority is strengthened. But for this power not to be eroded, something even deeper is necessary: true independence, the ability to sustain one's strength without relying on third parties who always demand interest for loyalty. Machiavelli was categorical. No prince remains strong by relying solely on external forces. Relying on one's own loyal armies was for him the basis of sovereignty. And this doesn't just apply to kingdoms or governments. It applies to any area of life. Those who depend exclusively on external approval, other people's money, or the strength of temporary allies always pay the price. And the price is often high: submission, blackmail, or betrayal. It's like building a castle on quicksand. Politics guided by reality, not ideals, shows that, however tempting it may be to outsource your security, true independence only arises when you build your own pillars. This could be acquired knowledge, built assets, a network of genuine trust, or personal discipline. In any scenario, relying on others opens the door to the interest that sooner or later takes its toll on your sovereignty. In practice, this translates into self-sufficiency. The professional who only survives at work because a superior protects him is vulnerable. The day that protector falls, he falls with him. However, those who master rare skills, build a solid reputation, and invest in their own training possess their own weapons that no one can take away. This also applies to finances. Those who live solely on other people's credit become slaves to taxes. Those who learn to invest and create their own sources of income strengthen their position. Machiavelli knew that virtue and fortune go hand in hand, but fortune favors those who are prepared. And preparation, in this case, means minimizing the debts of emotional, economic, or political dependence. It is better to have fewer loyal allies than many mercenaries who, at the first better offer, switch sides. This independence doesn't eliminate alliances, but it changes their nature. You negotiate as equals because you have your own power. It's like in chess. A rook can cooperate with the bishop, but it doesn't depend on him to exist. Those who have their own weapons can even join forces with others, but always with the freedom to withdraw whenever they want. This is the secret to avoiding being hated without becoming a hostage. When your strength is internal, you don't need to bow down or overly please. And here, a crucial point arises. True independence not only protects against submission, but also creates space to see the truths no one dares to speak. This is where the next challenge arises: dealing with sycophants, those who surround power with poisonous flattery and who, if left unchecked, blind even the most astute of leaders. Few enemies are as dangerous as the sycophant. Machiavelli warned that around power, sweet voices, exaggerated praise, and advice tailored not to the truth, but to please. And this is the most insidious poison. Those who govern surrounded only by approval end up believing in their own bubble. This is why he recommended creating channels of hard truth, but with a caveat. The ruler must control who can speak the truth, when, and to what extent. Otherwise, the advice turns into turmoil. Think of a businessman who doesn't receive honest criticism from his team. Mistakes accumulate until bankruptcy. But those who allow space for a loyal minority to expose flaws and who know how to distinguish loyalty from insolence build a shield against illusions. Politics guided by reality, not ideals, requires listening to what is uncomfortable, but without relinquishing control of the narrative. In the corporate world, this dilemma is easy to identify. How many times have directors fallen because they trusted embellished reports, full of upward graphs that hid the real crisis? This is the effect of sycophants. They don't lie outright, but omit crucial details to maintain their prestige. A shrewd leader needs to practice calculated force in this regard as well, rewarding those who bring uncomfortable truths and subtly punishing those who flatter without substance. It's a way to avoid being hated in the long run, because people respect leaders who correct mistakes in time more than those who lose themselves in illusions. Virtue here is having the courage to create environments where constructive criticism isn't seen as betrayal, but as a foundation for stronger decisions. But be careful. Opening up space for truth is not the same as making yourself vulnerable to the chaos of unrestricted opinion. The wise ruler, or the modern professional who desires real leadership, establishes clear channels, a few trustworthy, objective, loyal, and tested voices. This even applies to personal life. Friends who tell you what you need to hear, not what you want to hear, and yet control remains with you. Machiavelli knew that giving free rein to opinions is political suicide, but creating a structure where the truth arrives filtered without flattery or venom is the key to adaptation. The problem is that not everyone has the courage to deal with hard truths, and this lack of courage leads many to the worst trap: neutrality, which seems safe, but in practice is the quickest shortcut to falling into the line of fire. Neutrality is a comfortable illusion, but Machiavelli made it clear: those who try to hide behind it end up crushed by both sides. In war, the state that declares itself neutral becomes a battlefield, invaded by enemies and allies who don't respect its weakness. In personal life, those who avoid taking a stand to avoid displeasing end up displeasing everyone. Politics guided by reality, not ideals, shows that there is no neutral ground when power is at stake. It's like being in a gunfight and believing that standing in the middle of the street will save you. It won't. Either you raise a shield on one side, or you'll be shot by both. Neutrality seems prudent, but it's simply a lack of virtue to take risks. Look at the corporate environment. The employee who never takes a stand, trying to please bosses and colleagues simultaneously, soon becomes irrelevant. And when a crisis hits, they're the first to be discarded, precisely because no one trusts someone who doesn't choose a side. This also applies to politics. Small countries that tried to please great powers, instead of establishing clear alliances, were swallowed up by history. Machiavelli taught that the end justifies the means when it comes to ensuring the survival of the state. Neutrality, in this case, is not kindness. It's suicide disguised as prudence. And in personal relationships, it's no different. Those who pretend to agree with everyone lose respect because selective transparency is worth more than cowardly silence. The calculated use of force also means knowing when to say yes and when to say no without fear of the consequences. Neutrality is comfortable only until the conflict heats up. The moment tensions flare, the neutral is seen as a traitor by both sides. This applies to kingdoms, businesses, families, and even friendships. Machiavelli made it clear that constant adaptability does not mean indecision, but rather strategically choosing which side to be on and changing positions only when reality demands it. The neutral, in turn, does not adapt, they paralyze, and paralysis is always punished. Choosing is risky, but not choosing is fatal. And once chaos sets in, the only option left for those who wish to survive is to practice the engineering of power, creating rituals, discipline, and predictability to transform disorder into solid authority. Machiavelli understood that power is not sustained by improvisation, but by the ability to transform chaos into predictable order. When everything around seems to be falling apart, discipline becomes the anchor that keeps the leader standing. Rituals are not mere meaningless repetitions, but tools of psychological engineering. An army, for example, doesn't march in line simply for aesthetic reasons. Cadence creates unity, trust, and obedience. Similarly, in companies or families, establishing schedules, rules, and systems creates a sense of stability that protects against panic. Politics, guided by reality, not ideals, shows that those who control the routine also control the group's emotions. Chaos may be inevitable, but it doesn't have to be uncontrollable. The leader who projects predictability becomes a safe haven amid the storm. This principle can be applied to anyone's daily life. Think about the professional who faces constant market crises. If they don't have a study, planning, and even self-care ritual, they get lost in the whirlwind. Those who rely on daily discipline create an invisible force field against the unexpected. The same goes for relationships. Couples who go through difficulties but maintain simple rituals, like weekly dinners, walks, or regular conversations, resist more than those who let chaos engulf everything. This is the modern translation of virtu and fortuna, using virtu to create discipline that bends fortune in your favor. Because fortune is fickle, but discipline is a choice. And the calculated use of force isn't limited to battles. It manifests itself in the silent constancy of small, repeated actions. Predictability isn't monotony, but strategic security. This is evident even in negotiations. When others know you meet deadlines, keep your word, and act consistently, your reputation solidifies like a rock. This is what Machiavelli called avoiding the fatal error, disorderly concessions that erode respect. Managing chaos requires understanding that discipline is more powerful than momentary charisma. Charisma can ignite crowds, but discipline sustains empires. And when the leader fails to impose order, the group crumbles with it. Hence the importance of monitoring one's own concessions. Small gestures of weakness can accumulate until they destroy the authority you've earned. And it is precisely at this point that the next warning arises, the fatal errors of the prince and the common man who, in the name of pleasing others, forgo respect and end up corroded from within. Machiavelli never tired of repeating, "Nothing weakens a ruler more than poorly calculated concessions. The mistake isn't in giving in, but in giving in without strategy." The father who says yes to everything loses authority in front of his children. The boss who tries to please every subordinate ends up seen as weak. The politician who promises the world to maintain popularity ends up hostage to his own words. Politics, guided by reality, not ideals, teaches that respect is born from the balance between firmness and flexibility. Too much concession becomes weakness. Absolute rigidity becomes tyranny. The secret lies in the invisible medium, making quick cuts when necessary and offering rewards in a calculated, never gratuitous way. Avoiding being hated doesn't mean sacrificing yourself to please, but knowing how to say no when doing so preserves your sovereignty. Fatal mistakes almost always stem from good intentions. A leader wants to be loved, and to achieve this grants small privileges. But every concession creates a precedent, and soon what was once an exception becomes the rule. The employee who got special time off demands another. The political ally who received a favor asks for double. The partner who was forgiven once feels free to repeat the betrayal. Machiavellian logic is clear. The end justifies the means when the means is strategic denial to maintain order. Mistimed kindness corrodes like rust, silent but relentless. This is why the calculated use of force is essential. Applying firm limits before permissiveness destroys respect. It's not cruelty, it's intelligence. It's better to be remembered for a fair no than for an endless series of yeses that fueled abuse. A practical example? Think of kings who granted too much power to nobles to secure alliances, only to be deposed by them. Or of businessmen who continually gave in to demanding clients until they went bankrupt for failing to maintain minimal margins. Virtue and fortune clearly play a role here. Fortune will always test the ruler with external pressures. It's up to virtue to resist the urge to please. Too many concessions don't buy loyalty, they buy contempt. Because deep down, people don't respect those who bow down constantly. They respect those who maintain their composure, even under pressure. Machiavelli would call this a fatal error, because there's no going back. Once you lose respect, it's hard to regain it. And it's at this point that the true turning point arises, abandoning the need for validation and embracing a manifesto of sovereignty, where mission is more important than pleasing and direction more than being accepted. There comes a time when every man must choose, live for approval or live for his own mission. Machiavelli knew that the most dangerous are not those who beg for applause, but those who forge ahead despite boos. Politics guided by reality, not ideals, makes it clear. Need weakens, direction strengthens. When the mission is greater than the need to please, the leader gains a rare kind of immunity. He can be criticized, misunderstood, even hated, but he continues to advance because he does not depend on the validation of others. This is sovereignty. The same logic applies to everyone. The artist who creates through his own vision instead of selling himself for likes. The entrepreneur who innovates even without initial support. The common man who chooses discipline over approval. This is where true independence is born. The courage to be unpopular in the name of necessity. This manifesto isn't just talk, it's daily practice. Every decision must be filtered by the question, does this strengthen my mission or feed my need? If it's merely need, it's a binding bond. If it's a mission, it's a brick in the castle of sovereignty. The end justifies the means when the means is to protect your direction from emotional distractions. And it's not about living alone, but about not being a slave to outside gazes. Machiavelli understood that a leader who lives to please doesn't last, while one who lives with purpose endures for centuries. The same is true in relationships. Those who seek constant validation become hostages to attention. Those who know their own worth naturally attract respect. The appearance of virtue may win over for a time, but only firm leadership maintains respect in the long run. This manifesto of sovereignty is, at its core, a silent declaration. I choose, I do not wait to be chosen. It is the most radical reversal Machiavelli proposes, to step out of the role of emotional subject and assume the role of prince of one's own life. And this does not mean absolute coldness, but brutal clarity, mission above need, direction above validation. It is a shift that frees us from the tyranny of applause and brings us closer to true strength. Those who understand this principle do not ask for permission to exist, they occupy their space. Those who do not understand continue to wait for recognition, that never comes. And it is precisely here that the surgical closure needs to be made. The question that divides boys from men, followers from leaders, dreamers from achievers. Do you choose or wait to be chosen? At the end of this journey, a question echoes like a blade. Do you choose or wait to be chosen? Machiavelli never left room for illusions. He knew that power is not handed over on a silver platter, but seized by those who dare. Politics guided by reality, not ideals, shows us that waiting for recognition is like living as a hostage. Those who wait to be chosen are always pawns, manipulated by those who understand beforehand that the end justifies the means. Life punishes the indecisive, in love, at work, in politics, in any human game. Those who choose, even if they fail, have virtue. Those who wait, even if they succeed, are guided by fortune. The decisive point is understanding that power begins with the act of placing oneself as the protagonist. Without this, every strategy becomes empty rhetoric. Choosing isn't just deciding on a path, but also assuming the weight of responsibility that comes with it. The person who chooses understands that they will be criticized, misunderstood, and at times even hated. But they also know that respect never stems from passivity. It's better to be feared than loved when the alternative is being ignored. This is the distinction that separates leaders from followers. The courage to decide amidst chaos, while others wait for the tide to decide their fate. In the corporate world, this means launching a risky project while colleagues await approval. In relationships, it means setting clear boundaries, even if it costs immediate affection. In all cases, the act of choosing creates sovereignty, while waiting breeds submission. And here's the hard truth: there is no neutrality in this game. Either you choose, or someone else will choose for you. Machiavelli called this the calculated use of force. Strength is not just physical, but also psychological. It is the ability to take the initiative. Virtù and fortuna meet at this point. Fortuna will always offer opportunities, but only virtù, your conscious action, can seize them. The final question, therefore, is not theoretical, it is practical. In your life, have you been choosing your paths or waiting for someone to open the door for you? This is the line that separates those who live under external validation and those who build real sovereignty. And perhaps that is precisely why this closure needs to make way for the next step, the revelation of a secret that Machiavelli never wanted to reveal, but which can completely change the way you view power. Now you wield an arsenal that most will never dare touch, but there's no point in knowing the invisible laws of power if you continue to live as a subject to circumstances. Machiavelli made it clear: those who don't act become playthings in the hands of those who do. And here I'm not talking about kings, but about you, at home, at work, in relationships. How long will you continue to give in, waiting for someone to realize your worth? The world doesn't reward intentions, it rewards action. If you don't use what you've learned, you'll remain trapped in the comfortable illusion of ideals, while others, less talented but more daring, walk all over you with a cynical smile on their faces. So I ask you, will you choose to be loved and disposable, or respected and needed? Will you continue begging for acceptance, or will you build your sovereignty brick by brick with discipline, silence, and firm choices? This is the final cut. There is no middle ground. Either you embrace a mission greater than your needs, or you will continue begging for validation that will never come. The secret Machiavelli hinted at, but never clearly stated, is that sovereignty is not asked for. It is taken. The prize doesn't wait to be chosen. It offers itself as a challenge. And you? Will you be the challenge or the one constantly chasing it? If this knowledge bothered you, it's because it hit exactly where it needed to. Now, the decision is yours. Apply it or bury it. But remember, those who pretend they didn't hear this warning have already made their choice to remain dominated. And I want you to tell me, what will your stance be from now on? Will you take your own direction or remain hostage to the applause of others? Write in the comments, because this is the first step for those who stop waiting and start choosing. And if you want to stay sharp, prepared, and immune to illusions, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. Because here, with every word, you will be reminded of a brutal truth. Either you rule your life or someone else rules it for you.